You tell them something that hurt you. You try to stay calm. You choose your words carefully. You even start with, "I'm not attacking you," which is already a bad sign. Because apparently, before you can have a feeling, you first have to file a legal disclaimer. Then you explain what happened, how it felt, what you needed. And 10 minutes later, somehow you are apologizing. Not because the issue was solved, not because they understood you, but because the conversation quietly climbed a ladder and they ended up above you again. You are too sensitive. You misunderstood. You are making drama. You should be grateful. You should really work on the way you bring things up. Very efficient system. Terrible for your nervous system. And from the outside, this can look like confidence. They seem certain, untouchable, above needing anyone, above being wrong. But here is the reframe. Superiority is not always confidence. Sometimes it is armor. And with strong narcissistic patterns, that armor often says, "If I stay above you, you cannot make me feel small." That is the mechanism. Not an excuse, an explanation. And an explanation is not a permission slip. Understanding the armor does not mean you have to stand there while someone hits you with it. Very important. This video is not for diagnosing people from your couch. Tempting, not recommended. It is about understanding a pattern. Because once you understand the pattern, you stop mistaking superiority for strength. So today, we are talking about what I call the superiority armor. The inner armor that protects someone from shame, dependency, and the frightening experience of meeting another person at eye level. Imagine a person wearing invisible armor. Not metal, not medieval, no helmet with feathers. We are not doing a costume drama. This armor is made of being above, being right, being special, being admired, being untouchable, being the person who does not need anyone too much. From the outside, it can look powerful, but armor has one problem. It protects you from being hurt, and it also prevents you from being touched. That is the tragedy. The superiority armor keeps shame away, but it also keeps closeness away. Because real closeness requires equality. And equality is dangerous when your whole emotional system is built around staying above. If superiority is your armor, equality feels like danger. That is why narcissistic superiority can feel so rigid. It is not only, "I think I am better than you." It is often closer to, "I need to feel above you because if I come down to eye level, I might feel small." That smallness is what the armor is trying to prevent. The shame, the dependence, the need, the feeling of being ordinary, exposed, or not enough. So admiration becomes emotional oxygen. Being special becomes stability. And being challenged can feel like an attack on the whole structure. They are not just enjoying the high chair. They are afraid of what happens if they have to climb down, which makes the high chair less of a throne and more of a cage, with very good posture. For most people, needing someone is uncomfortable sometimes, but it is also part of love. You miss someone, you ask for help. You say, "I need you." A little dramatic maybe, but human. In a narcissistic pattern, needing can feel very different. It can feel like losing height, because if I need you, then you matter. And if you matter, then you have power over me. You could reject me. You could disappoint me. You could see something I do not want seen. You could become important enough to affect how I feel about myself. That is dangerous. So the armor says, do not need. Stay above. Act like nobody matters too much. That is why the contradiction can be so confusing. They may crave attention intensely while acting like they do not need anyone. They want admiration, but they resist dependency. They want to be seen, but not exposed. They want closeness, but only if closeness does not require equality. It is like inviting someone into your house, but only allowing them to stand in the hallway and compliment the architecture. No sitting down, no opening closets, no noticing the basement. Admiration is allowed. Mutual vulnerability is not. And that is why it can feel so disorienting. One moment, you feel important. The next moment, you feel dismissed, pulled close, then pushed below. Because the moment you become emotionally important, the armor gets nervous. And nervous armor usually does not say, "I am scared." It says, "You are the problem." Very charming, very exhausting. We are apparently the only species capable of making someone feel guilty for noticing they have been dismissed. When someone starts to matter too much, they become dangerous. So the armor has a solution. Make them smaller. If I can reduce you, I do not have to feel vulnerable to you. If I can find flaws in you, I do not have to depend on you. If I can decide you are too needy, too dramatic, too ordinary, too sensitive, too much, then I can climb back into safety. Devaluation is not strength. It is emotional damage control. And yes, it can hurt. A lot. A cold comment, a dismissive joke, a comparison, a sudden withdrawal, a look that says, "Why would I take you seriously?" And then you start working harder, explaining better, being nicer, being calmer, trying to become the version of yourself they will not need to reduce. But that is the trap. You cannot love someone out of a defense that requires you to stay smaller. The devaluation is not always about your actual worth. It is about their need to restore height. The armor has to keep them above, so someone else has to be below. That is why the shifts can feel so confusing. One day, you are special, different, finally understood. The next day, you are disappointing, too demanding, not enough. And you keep asking, which version is true? The painful answer is, the pattern is true. When you make them feel admired, you may be lifted up. When you make them feel vulnerable, you may be pushed down. Not because your value changed overnight, because the armor reacted. This is the part that matters. Narcissistic superiority can look like confidence. The certainty, the posture, the way they speak, the way they seem untouched by doubt. But real confidence does not need every conversation to become a small throne room. Real confidence can say, "I was wrong." Real confidence can listen without collapsing. Real confidence can admire someone else without feeling erased. Real confidence can meet a need without turning it into an insult. That is the difference. Confidence is comfortable in equality. Narcissistic superiority is not. It needs ranking. Who is above? Who is below? Who is winning? Who has the power? Who gets admired? That is not freedom. That is maintenance. Imagine having to manage your image every moment, never needing too much, never being seen too clearly, never letting someone matter enough to hurt you, always adjusting the mirror so the reflection stays grand. That is not peace. That is a full-time job with terrible benefits. No health insurance, no days off, and the performance review is every conversation. And this is where you learn what kind of connection you are actually in. Not when everything is flattering, not when you praise them, not when you agree, but when you have a need, when you ask for repair, when you ask to be heard, when you say, "This hurt me." Can they stay connected without climbing above you? Can they hear you without making you smaller? Can they matter without needing you beneath them? That is the test. Because admiration is easy for the armor. Mutuality is not. Here is the hopeful part. You do not have to climb above people to be safe. And you do not have to shrink below someone to be loved. Real connection happens at eye level. That is where the armor loses its job. Real strength does not require superiority. It can stand next to someone, not above, not below, next to. It can say, "I need you. I hurt you. I was wrong. I am listening. I do not have to shrink you to stay intact." That is a very different kind of power. Quieter, less theatrical, no throne required. So if you recognize this armor in someone else, stop confusing it with confidence. Look for equality. Look for repair. Look for the ability to care about your inner world without making it inconvenient. And if you recognize some of this armor in yourself, start gently, not with shame, Shame builds thicker armor. Start with one honest sentence. Maybe needing someone does not make me small, because it does not. Need is not humiliation. Equality is not defeat. You do not have to become untouchable to matter, and you do not have to make yourself smaller to be loved. Real connection begins when the armor is no longer in charge. Drop a comment. Have you ever seen confidence that felt more like armor? Because once you can name the armor, you stop mistaking it for strength.